Okay, guys, it's ready. It's time to go. Hello. Wait for everybody to get settled. It's all very tragic. He just wants to be in my Bible class. Although he really doesn't. He doesn't understand that I'm boring. Okay. There were two things I was going to say beforehand. And I should have written them down. No, okay. Number one, the marriage seminar, which is coming up in like 10 days. Right? It is rapidly approaching. The pre-registering, the secretaries are writing that stuff down. Somebody asked about this. That's why I'm saying this. You're not going to get like a confirmation email. Now, maybe I'll have them send out confirmation emails this week. But it's not like they've been sending out confirmation emails if you've been registering on the website for the marriage retreat. They have a list. But I think I'll have them send out confirmation emails this week so that you know that you've registered. Because it's just, basically you fill out the form on the website and it just sends us an email. That's what it is. So if you've been registering and you're thinking, did it work, did it not work, I'll have them send out the confirmation this week. There will be child care provided on both evening and morning. How long is it on Saturday? 8:30 to noon, yeah. So there will be child care provided, just so you're aware of that. Breakfast at 8, right? So just be aware of that. There will be child care. And I think that was all I had to say about that, because those were the two new things. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about Acts. We're in Acts chapter 9. Acts chapter 9, does anybody know what page we're on? Good job, guys. Page 35. Good job, Pam and Carl. Page 35, as we are wrapping up the discussion of Saul's conversion. Acts chapter 9. Let's read 26 through 31. This is after his... actually, let's read 23 through 31. It should be. 23 through 31 of Acts chapter 9. When many days had passed, the Jews plotted to kill him, but their plot became known to Saul. They were watching the gates day and night in order to kill him. But his disciples took him by night and let him down through an opening in the wall, lowering him in a basket. When he had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples. They were all afraid of him, for they did not believe that he was the disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles and declared to them on the road how on the road he had seen the Lord, who spoke to him, and how at Damascus he had preached boldly in the name of Jesus. So he went in and out among them at Jerusalem, preaching boldly in the name of the Lord. And he spoke and disputed against the Hellenists, but they were seeking to kill him. And when the brothers learned this, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. So the church throughout all Judea and Galilee and Samaria had peace and was being built up, and walking in fear of the Lord and in the comfort of the Holy Spirit, it multiplied. So you can see these travels on page 36. I think I talked about this chart last week. Page 36, you can see, starts in Damascus, number 2, and then he goes down to Jerusalem, number 3, and then he ends up in Tarsus and Cilicia in number 4, and eventually, which we're not going to get to that yet, eventually does get to Antioch. So we can see his travels there. Let's talk about these questions. Why were the people in Jerusalem afraid of Saul? Okay, he persecuted everybody. Not everybody. Yeah, the Christians specifically, right? Why didn't they believe he had been converted? Yeah, think about what that says about their view of him. That he is, it kind of has to be that he's playing a trick, right? That's what they think. If he comes to them and says, I've been converted to Christ, and they say, no, you haven't, what are you doing? It kind of has to be that they think he's deceiving them or playing a trick. Why would he do that from their point of view? to infiltrate, right? He's trying to discover who the Christians are. Think about what that says about their view of him. Not only that he's persecuting them, but that he's devious and nefarious and willing to be dishonest about it, right? It's just the way that they view him is so antagonistic. Did you have something you wanted to say? Yeah, there's a couple of ways that could have gone. For those who didn't hear, Bob said it's interesting the Spirit didn't supernaturally confirm Saul, which he could have done that in a number of ways, right? Maybe some sort of miracle, could have done some sort of miracle. I don't know what miracle needed to be done. Although, anyway, that sort of, I don't know how that plays into the idea of the miracles as confirmation of teaching. Or the Spirit, who we know has done this in other places, not in the past at this point, but there's times when the Spirit just talks to the church. Can you think of another time when the Spirit just talks to the church? Okay, it tells Peter to go to Cornelius. When else? There's one other main time. Yeah, Philip and the eunuch. The other time is Acts 13. What happens in Acts 13 with Paul and Barnabas? Carl? Yeah, the Spirit tells the church in Antioch, hey, set apart Paul and Barnabas for this task I have. They're going to go on these mission journeys. And the Spirit just tells them, hey, do that. So it's not like the Spirit never just told the church what was going on. And you could think that the Spirit might have done that here. Paul shows up, or Saul, I guess is he still Saul at this point? I think he's still Saul at this point. He just shows up in Jerusalem. Hey guys, I'm a Christian now. And the Spirit could have just said, oh yeah, he's a Christian now. Like that could have been just the end of it. So why do you think he didn't do that? Yeah, one of the things that is abundantly clear as you go throughout Acts is the desire for the Spirit's desire to have other people involved in these things. To have other people involved in these things. Okay, you see it with Philip and the eunuch. Okay, well the Spirit could have just told the eunuch, right? So instead the Spirit supernaturally sends Philip to the guy, or maybe I guess supernaturally sends him away, really. And then you see it with Paul and Ananias, right? Didn't have to involve Ananias, right? But he does involve Ananias in Saul's conversion. And again, you're seeing, I'm going to come back to you, Carl. You're seeing it here too, right? Who's the one that steps up to confirm Saul? Barnabas. What if Barnabas had not done that? What do you think would have happened? Yes. And what would that have done sort of long term, do you think? If Saul just gets rejected out of hand by the other apostles, what does that signal to the rest of the church while Saul's trying to work? Yeah, don't listen to him. Yeah, he's not one of the trusted. He's not somebody you should pay attention to. Saul does kind of need, in the eyes of the public at least, he needs the support of the other apostles. They need to be presenting a unified front, right? And I think it would dramatically affect his work in the next few decades if he never sort of gets in sync with the other apostles. And Barnabas sort of stepping up to the plate and saying that. Did you have something you wanted to say earlier, Carl? I sort of forgot about you. Yeah, and I think that's true. The idea that because Barnabas stepped up, the Spirit didn't think it was necessary. The Spirit lets people do stuff first. I think that's an important idea. especially as we think about Christianity in perpetuity, right? Not just because we don't have apostles forever. So as you think about the future of the church as it's going to go for the next, well, at this point, 2,000 years, signaling the importance of people being involved, right? That this is a people-driven thing, that people are going to be involved in converting and teaching and encouraging and supporting. It's not just going to be God that's doing all this stuff supernaturally. Even when God was doing stuff supernaturally, he still wanted people to be involved. Yeah, this is sort of and it's not stated in the text, but I have thought about this before. The amount of forgiveness that's required here, it is, I would say, likely that there are Christians in Jerusalem who died because of Saul, just legit because of Saul. And so you're thinking, you're sitting in the church, and let's say your mother was put in jail, and Paul cast his vote, and she died. Okay, and then this guy shows up. Hey, I'm a Christian now. I mean, how are you going to feel about that? This is not an easy thing that God is asking the church to do, because it is God, right? God's asking the church to forgive him because God's the one that made him an apostle. God's the one that did that. He is asking the church to accept this person who probably has very much negatively affected the lives of these people. He's asking them to accept him as one of their own. And is that easy? No, I don't think so. And again, we're not told. I do kind of wish we had more about sort of the personal angst in the church in Jerusalem, because I do think there would have been not just fear, but maybe some hatred or some bitterness or some anger, right? Not just fear. These other negative emotions that I think would have been, and I think personally, to be clear, I do think this is why he goes to Tarsus, why he leaves Jerusalem, even though the apostles accept him. I do think he left because he knew that it was very hard and it would be very difficult for him to hang around there. So he goes to some place where nobody knows who he is. Well, actually, they would have known who he was, but not as this persecutor of the church, right? He goes up to this place and he's just like, oh, hey, look, it's Saul again. And he can just sort of start over with his ministry rather than sort of saddling the church with his baggage. Have you ever doubted someone's conversion? What leads us to doubt somebody's conversion? Yeah, it's either past history or what they're doing today. What did you say? Yeah. Yeah, it's the same stuff, right? Either they did something to you, you know their past. Did you have something you wanted to say, Carl? Yeah. So it really is, it's one of those two things. It's either what they've done in the past or what they're doing now. And as you think about, there's like 8 things I want to say. What does it do to a new convert when they are doubted in their conversion? What does it do? Yeah, it discourages them. Alicia said it makes them doubt. Because that's what it does. It makes them doubt or be discouraged. And I don't think Paul was immune to that. I think he would have been discouraged. I think that would have been very devastating to him. And I think that we have to be careful when a person is converted, they're a new Christian, there's this fragility to it. It's very new, they're not mature, they're not established. It does not take much to destroy a new Christian. Right? We have to be very careful about how we approach that. And maybe it's not that we're doubting their conversion, but if we just sort of let them be on their own, I think is another way. They just sort of, and it ends up, that's what Saul does for a while, but of course he was an apostle, so I guess he could do that. But I think sometimes people are converted and we just sort of, okay, be free, and we don't do anything with it. We don't encourage them or support them, and I think we have to be careful about how we encourage and support especially new Christians. Yes. Yeah, for those who didn't hear, especially the bigger the contrast between pre-Christian life and Christian life, the bigger the contrast, the harder it is for somebody to settle into the new way of living, right? And the idea, a lot of people have this idea maybe that I'm never going to be good enough, I'm never going to be able to outlive my past, I'm never going to be able to be better. And we have to be very careful to encourage people, yes, you can be better, you can be the kind of person that God wants you to be. And really, at the end of the day, no matter what you did in the past, that's the point of forgiveness, right? That's sort of the whole deal, is that stuff has been forgiven. Not that it's consequence-free, and I think we're seeing that here. Saul was forgiven for the things he did against the church, but that did not mean that those negative feelings and awkward situations and difficult emotions just went away. They didn't automatically vanish, right? So you have to deal with consequence for sin, but of course we know that we're not going to be eternally responsible for the things that we're forgiven. Any other comments about that before we move on? Carl? Yes. And, we're going to see this, over and over. I don't have this in the notes, but you think about this. Verse 24, they watched the gates day and night in order to kill him. Verse 29, he spoke against the Hellenists, and they were seeking to kill him. This is going to be a part of Saul's life forever. And remember, what did Jesus say to Ananias? Yeah, I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name. Doesn't take very long for that to start, right? He's being driven out of town after town. So, of course, we knew that was going to be the case. Any other comments before we go to the next section? Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting point. Verse 30. The Christians did accept him, right? Because they're the ones who end up getting him out of town, right? They're the ones, let's see. Yeah, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. So the brothers, when we say brothers there, I think it's pretty clearly referring to Christians. The Christians did end up trying to save him, right? Or not trying, they succeeded in helping him escape. So they did end up accepting him in the church, even though there's, I think, a lot of unspoken angst. All right, we're going to switch back to Peter on page 37. We'll come back to the map on page 36 as we go through. You can see how this is linked together, and we'll come back to that when we get to Acts 11. We'll come back to Paul and Barnabas. But we switch back to Peter in verse 32, Acts 9:32. I kind of think this is where the chapter break should be, but here we are. Yeah. Yeah, although it's multiplying where? Judea, Galilee, and Samaria. So kind of where Paul leaves, incidentally. Now, we're going to come back to Paul's work in Tarsus, but what we're talking about in 31, as this sort of concludes this section of the text, right? And these verses, I'm actually glad you brought this up. Verse 31 is a signal verse, where it does this, Luke does this several times in Acts, where he sort of gives this sort of summary that the church is multiplying and growing and having good things happen. Those are sort of concluding verses to a section. So we have this incident with Saul, and at the end of the day, the church was growing, right? And so we're going to switch this section into a new story, right? He's done this in the past. He did this several times at the beginning of Acts. I'm not going to go back and find them, but he did this several times at the beginning of Acts, sort of. This is the signpost, hey, this is the end of this event, and we're starting into a new story, this time about Peter. Now, I've got the related verses up here. I don't know if you've been reading the related, there wasn't any for the previous section, but I hope you're reading the related verses on your own, and you're studying these, because that will help us in our understanding of these. Matthew 16, of course, that's when Jesus says, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it, right? I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Acts 2, of course, we have the other manifestation. We've talked about this at length. The other special manifestation of the Spirit when he descends on them on Pentecost. And then, of course, Galatians 2 we'll read at the end of this. We'll read Galatians 2. Paul talks about Peter's sort of hypocrisy. So let's read Acts 9:32. We got two stories here that sort of are weird, but we'll talk about them. Now, as Peter went here and there among them all, he came down also to the saints who lived at Lydda. There he found a man named Aeneas, thank you, Don, bedridden for 8 years, who was paralyzed. And Peter said to him, Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. Rise and make your bed. And immediately he rose, and all the residents of Lydda and Sharon saw him, and they turned to the Lord. Now there was in Joppa a disciple named Tabitha, which translated means Dorcas. She was full of good works and acts of charity. In those days she became ill and died. And when they had washed her, they laid her in an upper room. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, hearing that Peter was there, sent 2 men, urging him, please come without delay. So Peter rose and went to them, and when he arrived, they took him to the upper room. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other garments that Dorcas made while she was with them. But Peter put them all aside and knelt down and prayed, and turning to the body, he said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand and raised her up. Then calling the saints and widows, he presented her alive, and it became known throughout all Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. And he stayed in Joppa for many days with one Simon, a tanner. Okay, 2 random stories. Why does Luke include these stories? Just 2 random, they seemingly have no connection, they're just sort of random stories. Carl? Okay, it does sort of establishes where Peter is and why, right, for the next story. What else? Could have just said that he was at Joppa. Okay, so so he's going to go back and forth between Saul and Peter for a bit. It is showing that the other apostles are still doing stuff, right? Peter's not just done because we switched over to Saul. What else? Yeah, I think this is sort of a day in the life of Peter, right? This is the normal operation of the apostles. They go from place to place, they heal people, they're raising people, they're doing stuff. And it is sort of explaining, I think, verse 31, right? The church throughout all Judea and Galilee and Samaria had peace and was being built up, and walking in the fear of the Lord and the comfort of the Holy Spirit, it multiplied. Well, this is what's happening while that's going on. This is how they're doing that, is the apostles are going from place to place and they're doing things. And here's the question that I sort of have thought about before. Why did Peter raise this woman and not the hundreds of other Christians that have probably died in the early years of the church? Think about how many people have probably died in Jerusalem in these 2 years. How many people die in a year in Jerusalem? I don't know. A lot, probably. So why raise this woman and not all the rest of them? I'm reasonably confident that there would be more recordings of the resurrections had they been going on. I don't know that, I guess. I do know that he didn't raise everybody who died. That would have been a secular history event, I think, that would have really been recorded. I think it's reasonable to conclude that if they had just been raising every Christian that died, that would have reached Caesar. It would have been a much bigger national event. Carl? Okay, so obviously we know, Carl said a lot of stuff there, but I'll sort of recap it. We know that miracles were to confirm the teaching, to get the attention of the people. So maybe he does this here in Joppa. Is it in Joppa, right? I think he is. Yeah, in Joppa. Maybe he does this here in Joppa because they haven't heard the word before, and this is sort of a way to get their attention. Did I see a hand over here? Oh, okay, go ahead. It's an interesting thought, right? I've thought about this before in a number of instances. Death for the Christian is described as rest, right? Isn't that what it's described as? Sort of this idea of why did you bring me back? I have thought about that before too, of if we're at rest when we die, as a Christian, right? This idea, why would you bring me back to this non-restful state? And the question might be, well, because I want to spend more time with my family, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of, the resurrections in particular, there's a lot of, as I think about what would be going on in the early church, I think the resurrections as a miracle have a lot of different stuff attached to them that the other miracles don't have. Okay, well, the healing, you heal somebody, they go about their business. It was great and it was awesome and they glorify God for it. But the resurrection, Jesus, we know, of course, this is one of the ideas why Jesus wept when he was talking about Lazarus in that story, right? Lazarus dies and they're all sad and he's sad. And one of the theories that's been put forth is Jesus is sad because he knows he's raising Lazarus from that rest, right? That he's bringing Lazarus back into this life. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think it would be difficult if you're a Christian in the first century and somebody gets to have their mother or their sister or their father or their friend back, and you know the apostles can raise the dead. You know that because he's done that. I think it would be a little bit difficult not to have this idea, well, why are you not just bringing back all of us, right? You brought back their brother, why not my brother? You brought back their mother, why not my mother? Larry? Yeah.
So there are situations where you kind of get some idea that we've had where it was.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely true. I think that those who die in the Lord, we believe this. I don't know if we think about it very often, but the central tenet one of the central tenets of Christianity is that those who die in the Lord are better off. Like, that's one of the central pillars of the faith. And Paul says it, right? For me to live is Christ, to die is what? Yeah, I could stay here and work with you, or I could die and go be with the Lord. So we know that to be the case. The resurrections in particular, and again, I don't know how many of you have thought about this before, but I do think about this as it relates to, let's talk about Tabitha in Acts chapter, or Dorcas, I guess. The idea that maybe Tabitha or Dorcas wasn't done with the work that she had to do. Well, maybe that's true. I don't know. Maybe Tabitha had more that she was going to do in her life that needed to be done. Now, ultimately, the answer for this, and I can cop this out because it is what it is the Spirit has a plan and knows the people that need to be raised and not. That's the cop-out answer. It is not untrue. It is true that the Spirit knows ultimately. But I think it would be hard. I think there's a lot of things that we don't think about that would be difficult in first century Christianity. I do think it would be hard if you're a Christian to know that some people got to have their loved ones back and you don't get to. And I think that would have been a thing that people struggled with. And I think sometimes we maybe struggle with the idea, well, I wish that we could have our loved ones back. Some people, I think it would be much harder. I think about Tracy and her dad. I think it would be much harder for Tracy if somebody else got to have their loved one back and she didn't get to have hers. I think that would be much more difficult than just knowing that this is the way death is. So just some things to think about. Why does Luke spend so much time on Peter and Paul as opposed to who? Who else could he be writing about right now? Yeah, there's like 11 other dudes, right? You got, their names all just left me. Matthew and John and who else? Matthias. Like, why don't we have more about Matthias? I don't know. We just have one thing about Matthias. Why Peter and Paul? Okay, so Peter sort of taking it to the Jews and Paul sort of taking it to the Gentiles. So we have both groups covered. We don't really need anything else. What else? Were the other apostles just sitting around not doing anything? Yeah, that's probably what it was. Huh? Okay, it would be a repeat. At a certain point, you're just telling the same stories over and over again, right? I think that the other apostles, it's not like the other apostles were just sitting around not doing anything. There's some secular history about apostles going into Europe and into Asia and into different down into Africa and different places. But at the end of the day, it is true what Don says. What is the point of Acts? Why did Luke write it? You guys remember? Okay. To tell the story of the church, Acts 1. In the first book, I dealt with all that Jesus began to do and teach until the day when he was taken up, right? And then what did he say at the beginning of Luke? Oh, man. It would be so gigantic. It would be so gigantic, wouldn't it? Yes. Yeah, he gives us enough is sort of the idea that I think you're conveying there. Luke 1, inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished, it seemed good to me, having followed all things closely, to write an orderly account for you that you may have certainty concerning the things you've been taught, which is essentially Steve's point, right? The scriptures were written to fulfill a purpose for the next, well, at least 2,000, because here we are. Might be another 1,000, I don't know. Because of the nature of when they were written, because of what their goal is into perpetuity, you can't just have a giant book. It has to be copyable. It has to be carryable. It has to be manageable. It has to be something that the church can have, right? And of course, God's not stupid. He knows how technology is going to advance. He knows how things are going to go. But at the end of the day, we need a book that is digestible, something that's understandable across languages and cultures and purposes. And I think at a certain point, Peter and Paul cover the bases. How did the church spread? What does it mean to be a Christian? How are people added to the church? What does early church life look like? What is apostolic authority? How does that function? What does that mean? How does this all relate to the written word? Those questions are all answered in the work of Peter and Paul. That's not to say that the other apostles weren't doing stuff. Obviously, they were. But it would be a bit redundant because they're just going to be doing the same stuff Peter and Paul are doing, right? They're going to be teaching and performing miracles. I'll come back to you, Larry. And raising people from the dead and teaching and writing different things. But it's not going to be anything different fundamentally than what's going on with Peter and Paul. And so at the end of the day, this is what we have because this is the thing that is necessary for us to have a relationship with God. The other stuff's not unimportant. But it would be, I think, mostly a repeat of what's going on with Peter and Paul. Larry? Yes. Yeah, and the Pharisees and Sadducees, they had all the traditions of the elders. generations and generations of people interpreting and reinterpreting and uninterpreting, and what did the preacher say? With much learning, I can't remember the exact phrase. Something about many books. Yeah. Of books there is no end, and much learning is something about madness, I think is what he says. I can't remember the exact phrase. At the end of the day, this is what we need. And I think that's the important point. So we come to Peter and Cornelius. What time is it? Oh, man. Yeah, we'll read the next section. So we're reintroduced to Peter. Acts chapter 10, verse 1. Since at Caesarea there was a man named Cornelius. So let's go back to the map and look at this stuff real quick. Where was my map about this? Page 29. Let's go back to page 29 real quick and look at the map here. So, Peter goes to Lydda and Joppa. You can see Jerusalem, the star in the middle of Judea. And then Lydda is sort of northwest of Jerusalem. And then Joppa is on the coast, northwest of Jerusalem. So you can see where Peter's journeying, right, to Lydda and then to Joppa. And then at Caesarea. Caesarea is an important city in Scripture. Of course, we just read that verse 9:30, when the brothers learned this, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. Caesarea is the center of a lot of stuff. So Cornelius lives in Caesarea. You can see where Peter is along the coast in Joppa. So let's read this again. Acts 10:1. At Caesarea there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion of what was known as the Italian cohort, a devout man who feared God with all his household, gave alms generously to the people, prayed continually to God. About the 9th hour of the day he saw clearly in a vision an angel of God come and say to him, Cornelius. And he stared at him in terror and said, What is it, Lord? And he said to him, Your prayers and your alms have ascended as a memorial before God. Now send to Joppa and bring one Simon who is called Peter. He is lodging with one Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the sea. And when the angel who spoke to him had departed, he called 2 of his servants and a devout soldier from those who attended him, and having related everything to them, he sent them to Joppa. Okay. What do we know about Cornelius? What kind of person is he? Okay, God-fearing and devout. He's a generous person. What else? Yeah, he's not only a Roman soldier, he's what? An officer. Right, is that what you were saying, Alicia? Yeah, he's an officer. What does that imply about him as a person? Well, one of two things. Either he has leadership qualities or he's related to somebody important. Probably the leadership qualities, but it is not impossible that he's just related to somebody important who gave him a good job. But probably his leadership qualities, right? He's a leader of men. He is influential, right? He's got a certain amount of power and influence over the people of the region because he is a centurion. And when it says he fears God, which God? God of Israel. Why is that important? Okay, but he could have been, this is an important point. It's not just that he fears some nebulous concept of God, right? Or Zeus or Hermes or whoever the Roman gods were, right? Specifically, he fears Yahweh. Now, we don't know how he learned about Yahweh. How would he have learned about Yahweh? Yeah, it must have been for some Jewish worshipers, or I don't know. It's weird to see a Roman centurion who worships Yahweh. That's a weird circumstance, but somehow it came to pass. He fears Yahweh. He's giving alms. He's offering prayers, and so Yahweh. And again, important that this is specifically Yahweh. It's not just some nebulous God, because God then sends him an angel to tell him what? What does the angel tell him? No, before that. I have heard your prayers, right? Isn't that what God is saying through the angel? Of course, the angel doesn't say I, but the angel says your prayers have been heard by God. This is an unusual person. A person of Roman influence and power, who is in a particularly probably wealthy person, more wealthy than the average person, who knows about Yahweh, worships Yahweh, prays to Yahweh, is very generous. Cornelius is a unique person. Not unique, but very unusual. He is an unusual person. Good candidate for what's about to happen. Let's see here. So, what makes Cornelius a good candidate for showing that God is including the Gentiles? What makes him such a good candidate for this? Okay. Yeah. Cornelius' conversion will not go unnoticed by the people in Caesarea. It just won't. He has soldiers that will know, and his servants will know, and the people in his house will know. And through that, the people of the city will know, hey, this guy has been converted to Jesus, following Jesus. Again, a unique set of circumstances where he already worships Yahweh, so he's already primed to accept. The Jews already probably know about him, because he had to learn about Yahweh from a Jew. So he has some dealing with the Jews already. They know who he is, probably. He gives alms. The poor people know who he is. He's a generous person. So his conversion in particular will be a noteworthy event in the city of Caesarea. And, of course, we know throughout the world. It's hard to know when the word devout is used there. Yes, it's hard to know whether the soldier is devout to Yahweh or devout to Cornelius. It could be that this soldier, now, to be clear, it could be that he's teaching the soldiers about Yahweh, but it is also possible that he's like, this is an important thing, I need a really loyal soldier, I'm going to send this dude because he's real loyal to me. So it's hard to know, ultimately. Could be either way. What attributes of Cornelius are worth emulating? And then we'll be done. None. Nothing worthy of copying. What attributes, it's number 2 on there. What attributes of Cornelius are worth emulating? Okay, his prayer life, he's praying a lot, right? What else? Huh? Okay, when he heard what he needed to do, he acted on it. That's a common refrain in Acts. People hear what they need to do, and they do it. I think that's a lot of our Christian life is just that. We hear what we do, and we do it, as opposed to hearing what we do, and then we're done. Are you wanting to say something, or are you trying to cut me off? Yeah. Yeah, and we're going to see that as we go on, his openness to hear. So much of Christianity is simply being willing to act on information that we learn. Right? Instead of just absorbing it, hearing it, knowing it, and then not doing anything about it. That's like, I don't know, it's hard to put a percentage. At least half of our Christianity is just doing what we know, instead of letting it just sort of be in our head. He's a prayer, he's generous. I think that's something worth emulating. And, of course, we'll see more devout as we go on. So that's it for now. I think we are done, right? Yeah, is that the second bell or first bell? Second bell. Okay, so we'll pick it up there next week.